Okay, today we're going to be reading Chapter 2, Fire on the Mountain, on page 32. Remember, this is right after the three boys who went on the expedition, Ralph, Simon, and Jack, discovered that they are on an island all by themselves. Read along as I read. By the time Ralph finished blowing the conch, the platform was crowded, so he's calling another meeting. There were differences between this meeting and the one held in the morning. The afternoon sun slanted in from the other side of the platform, and most of the children, feeling too late the smart of sunburn, had put their clothes on. The choir, noticeably less of a group, had discarded their cloaks. Ralph sat on a fallen trunk, his left side to the sun. On his right were most of the choir. On his left, the larger boys who had not known each other before the evacuation. Before him, small children squatted in the grass. Silence now. Ralph lifted the cream shell to his knees, and a sudden breeze scattered light over the platform. He was uncertain whether to stand up or remain sitting. He looked sideways to his left, toward the bathing pool. Piggy was sitting near, but giving no help. Ralph cleared his throat. Well, then. All at once he found he could talk fluently and explain what he had to say. He passed a hand through his fair hair and spoke. We're on an island. We've been on the mountaintop and seen water all around. We saw no houses, no smoke, no footprints, no boats, no people. We're on an uninhabited island with no other people on it. Jack broke in. All the same, you need an army for hunting. Hunting pigs. Yes, there are pigs on the island. All three of them tried to convey the sense of the pink thing struggling in the creepers. We saw squealing. It broke away before I could kill it. But next time, Jack slammed his knife into a trunk and looked round challengingly. The meeting settled down again. So you see, said Ralph, we need hunters to get us meat. And another thing. He lifted the shell on his knees and looked round the sun-lashed faces. There aren't any grown-ups. We shall have to look after ourselves. The meeting hummed and was silent. And another thing. We can't have everybody talking at once. We'll have to have hands up, like at school. He held the conch before his face and glanced round the mouth. Then I'll give him the conch. Conch? That's what this shell's called. I'll give the conch to the next person to speak. He can hold it when he's speaking. But, look, and he won't be interrupted, except by me. Jack was on his feet. We'll have rules, he cried excitedly. Lots of rules. And when anyone breaks them, whoa, wacko, boing, doink. Ralph felt the conch lifted from his lap. Then Piggy was standing, cradling the great cream shell, and the shouting died down. Jack, left on his feet, looked uncertainly at Ralph, who smiled and patted the log. Jack sat down. Piggy took off his glasses and blinked at the assembly while he wiped them on his shirt. You're hindering Ralph. You're not letting him get to the most important thing. He paused effectively. Who knows we're here, huh? They knew at the airport. The man with the trumpet thing. My dad. Piggy put on his glasses. Nobody knows we are here, where we are, said Piggy. He was paler than before, and breathless. Perhaps they knew where we was going to, and perhaps not. But they don't know where we are, 'cause we never got there. He gaped at them for a moment, then swayed and sat down. Ralph took the conch from his hands. That's what I was going to say, he went on. When you he gazed at their intent faces. The plane was shot down in flames. Nobody knows where we are. We may be here for a long time. The silence was so complete that they could hear the unevenness of Piggy's breathing. The sun slanted in and lay golden over half the platform. The breezes that on the lagoon had chased their tails like kittens were finding their way across the platform and into the forest. Ralph pushed back the tangle of fair hair. and hung on his forehead. "So we may be here for a long time." Nobody said anything. He grinned suddenly. "But this is a good island. We, Jack, Simon, and me, we climbed the mountain. It's wizard. There's food and drink and rocks, blue flowers." Piggy, partly recovered, pointed to the conch in Ralph's hand, and Jack and Simon fell silent. Ralph went on. "While we're waiting, we could have a good time on this island." He gesticulated wildly. "It's like in a book." At once there was a clamor. "Treasure Island! Swallows and Amazons! Coral Island!" Ralph waved the conch. "This is our island. It's a good island. Until the grown-ups come to fetch us, we'll have fun." Jack held out his hand for the conch. "There's pigs," he said. "There's food and bathing water in that little stream along there, and everything. Didn't anyone find anything else?" He handed the conch back to Ralph and sat down. Apparently no one had found anything. The other boys first noticed the child when he resisted. There was a group of little boys urging him forward, and he did not want to go. He was a shrimp of a boy, about 6 years old, and one side of his face was blotted out by a mulberry-colored birthmark. He stood now, warped out of the perpendicular by the fierce light of publicity, and he bored into the coarse grass with one toe. He was muttering and about to cry. Now, this is a character we've never met before. So what do we know about him? He's 6 years old, he has this blotch on his face, and he's crying. The other little boys, whispering but serious, pushed him toward Ralph. "All right," said Ralph. "Come on, then." The small boy looked round in panic. "Speak up!" The small boy held out his hands for the conch, and the assembly shouted with laughter. At once he snatched back his hands and started to cry. "Let him have the conch," shouted Piggy. "Let him have it." At last Ralph induced him to hold the shell, but by then the blow of laughter had taken away the child's voice. Piggy knelt by him, one hand on the great shell, listening and interpreting to the assembly. So the boy is too shy to speak to the assembly. And who's interpreting for him? Who's going to be his speaker? Interestingly enough, Piggy is going to speak for him. I want you to think about why that's interesting. So this is Piggy speaking now. "He wants to know what you're going to do about the snake thing." Ralph laughed, and the other boys laughed with him. The small boy twisted further into himself. "Tell us about the snake thing." "Now he says it's a beastie." "Beastie?" "A snake thing ever so big. He saw it." "Where?" "In the woods." Either the wandering breezes or perhaps the decline of the sun allowed a little coolness to lie under the trees. The boys felt it and stirred restlessly. "You couldn't have a beastie or a snake thing on an island this size," Ralph explained kindly. "You only get them in big countries like Africa or India." Murmur and a grave nodding of heads. Yes, they agreed with Ralph. "He says the beastie came in the dark." "Then he couldn't see it." Laughter and cheers. "Did you hear that? Says he saw the thing in the dark." "He says he saw the beastie. It came and went away again, and came back and wanted to eat him." He was dreaming. Laughing, Ralph looked for confirmation round the ring of faces. The older boys agreed. But here and there, among the little ones, was the doubt that required more than rational assurance. He must have had a nightmare, stumbling about among all those creepers. More grave nodding. They knew about nightmares. "He says he saw the beastie, the snake thing, and will it come back tonight?" "But there isn't a beastie." "He says in the morning it turned to them things like ropes in the trees and hung in the branches. He says, will it come back tonight?" "But there isn't a beastie." There was no laughter at all now, and much grave watching. Ralph pushed both hands through his hair and looked at the little boy in mixed amusement and exasperation. Jack seized the conch. "Ralph's right, of course, there isn't a snake thing. But if there is a snake, we'd hunt it and kill it. We're going to hunt pigs and get meat for everybody, and we'll look for the snake too." "But there isn't a snake!" We'll make sure when we go hunting. Ralph was annoyed, and for the moment, defeated. He felt himself facing something ungraspable. The eyes that looked so intently at him were without humor. But there isn't a beast! Something he had not known was there rose in him and compelled him to make the point loudly and again. But I tell you, there isn't a beast! The assembly was silent. Ralph lifted the conch again, and his good humor came back, and he thought of what he'd say next. Now, we come to the most important thing. I was thinking, while we were climbing the mountain. He flashed a conspiratorial grin at the other two. And on the beach just now, this is what I thought. We want to have fun, and we want to be rescued. The passionate noise of agreement from the assembly hit him like a wave, and he lost his thread. He thought again. What was I thinking? We want to be rescued, and of course we shall be rescued. Voices babbled the simple statement unbacked by any proof, but the weight of Ralph's new authority brought light and happiness. He had to wave the conch before he could make them hear him. My father's in the Navy. He said there aren't any unknown islands left. He says the Queen has a big room full of maps, and all the islands in the world are drawn there. So the Queen's got a picture of this island. Again came the sounds of cheerfulness and better heart. And sooner or later a ship will put in here. It might even be my daddy's ship. So you see, sooner or later we shall be rescued. He paused, with the point made. The assembly was lifted towards safety by his words. They liked and now respected him. Spontaneously, they began to clap, and presently the platform was loud with applause. Ralph flushed, looking sideways at Piggy's open admiration, and then the other way at Jack, who was smirking and showing he too knew how to clap. Ralph waved the conch. Shut up! Wait! Listen! He went on in the silence, borne on his triumph. There's another thing. We can help them to find us. If a ship comes near the islands, they may not notice us. So we must make smoke on top of the mountain. We must make a fire. A fire! A fire! Let's make a fire! At once half the boys were on their feet. Jack clamored among them, the conch forgotten. Come on, follow me! The space under the palm trees was full of noise and movement. Ralph was on his feet too, shouting for quiet, but no one heard him. All at once the crowd swayed toward the islands and was gone, following Jack. Even the tiny children went and did their best among the leaves and broken branches. Ralph was left holding the conch with no one but Piggy. Piggy's breathing was quite restored. Like kids, he said scornfully, acting like a crowd of kids. Ralph looked at him doubtfully and laid the conch on the tree trunk. I bet it's gone tea time, said Piggy. What do they think they're going to do on that mountain? He caressed the shell respectfully, then stopped and looked up. Ralph, hey, where are you going? Ralph was already clambering over the first smashed swaths of the scar. A long way ahead of him was crashing and laughter. Piggy watched him in disgust, like a crowd of kids. He sighed, bent, laced up his shoes. The noise of the errant assembly faded up the mountain. Then, with the martyred expression of a parent who has to keep up with the senseless ebullience of the children, he picked up the conch, turned toward the forest, and began to pick his way over the tumbled scar. Okay, so you'll notice there are 3 stars at the bottom of the page, which tells us that the scene is over. The scene is going to restart on top of the mountain where the boys are attempting to build a fire. We'll pick up from there tomorrow in class. For now, I want you to think, what happens in this chapter that helps them build a new society, and what stops them from building a new society? Think about that for our class discussion tomorrow.